Welcome, everyone. Today is Tuesday, March 19th, 2024. This is the Finance Committee meeting. It is 6:31, and I'd like to call the meeting to order with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to the flag.
To the flag.
Allegiance
Of the
to the
States of America.
And to the
And to the republic
republic
stand
which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
God, indivisible,
one nation
liberty
under God,
for all.
indivisible, liberty.
Karen, you're in black and white also.
I don't know why.
I mean, there's a little tinge of color, but you're definitely not in color.
I don't know why. You're all in color to me.
Yeah.
This meeting, just one second, let me do the chair's announcement. This meeting is being held remotely in accordance with the Governor of Massachusetts March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law GLC 30A Section 20. And on March 29, 2023, Governor Healy signed a supplemental 2023 budget bill allowing remote and hybrid meeting options for public bodies through March 31st, 2025. This meeting is being recorded. Well, welcome everyone. So I see myself in nearly black and white. I don't know why, but you can hear me okay, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
Okay.
but I just froze, but yes. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. If I don't know if maybe I have a weak internet. So if I freeze, I'll turn my video off if that's, I don't know what's happening here. Okay. Well, we are reviewing warrant articles tonight. And our first warrant article is going to be, Shauna, do you have anyone here that you need? Doesn't look like you need to call your.
All my phone of friends did not dial in, so I'm on my own.
You certainly do not have a quorum. I do not see anyone. Okay, so we don't need to call the meeting to order. So the first article we're going to talk about, we've invited the Internet Advisory Committee to speak. And before we get started, Christopher's here. Christopher, I want to just turn the floor over to you for a second.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just wanted to, now I do have a potential conflict of interest due to a client that I have that is working with or working against municipal broadband networks in other towns. So I'm not going to participate in this conversation, but I going to be attending, in attendance for the meeting, but I will be recusing myself from the conversation and any kind of votes on this.
Great, thank you, Christopher. So Shauna is here. I just saw David Cole come into the meeting. So Shauna, did you want to start off and start the presentation on the article that we are talking about from the Internet Advisory Committee? Thank you very much, Shauna.
Sure, I'm happy to. And I now have my phone a friend here, David Cole, but we still don't have a quorum, so we're good. I think, was the committee sent this whole presentation? Did you get the whole PowerPoint presentation, Karen? You're on mute. Maybe somebody can tell me.
Karen, you're on mute.
I'm going to mute could everybody else please mute? There's some background noise going on.
I just want to know, did you guys get the whole deck?
Yes, they did.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. I'm only going to talk about like 4 pages, so don't worry. I just wanted to make sure you had background information. So we had most of the deck, the part that I'm not going to talk about today. The Internet Advisory Committee presented to the Select Board on December 4th, and we kind of gave the whole history. Like you can read all those slides at your leisure. But from that December 4th presentation, we had several open questions that we thought were still remaining about whether and how to proceed with the municipal light plant, or how we might, run fiber broadband, and then kind of next steps. So we're really here, this article kind of represents what we think is the first kind of step in the form of oversight that we think is necessary for moving forward. And then we looked at the options for what kind of public authority could best support the municipal light plant. So these were the kind of the questions that this article is trying to answer. So Article 32 The gist of it is that we want the municipal light board to be elected officials. And so it kind of spells out, you know, when you're creating a committee, you do a 3-year, a 2-year, and a 1-year term. But the gist is that we're proposing a 5-member board that would be elected to office to serve in that specific capacity. It's important to note that if we don't elect the board, then the default board is the select board. So it's not like it doesn't change whether or not you're going to, I know we can talk in a minute, but it doesn't change whether or not you're going to have a municipal light board or a municipal light plant. It just means that it would be elected people separately rather than the select board, because the select board is the default. So when we think about what we think the municipal light board should be tasked with, a lot of it is things that the Internet Advisory Committee is doing now, but the Internet Advisory Committee is just advisory to the select board and is obviously not elected. We're appointed by the select board. So we look at like the most important things that this entity, whatever it ends up looking like, needs to do, is really looking at the how to construct and operate the fiber broadband network, with construction being really, really key. In order to do that, you need funding. And so we've been looking at a number of different funding models. We've been looking at grants. We've been looking at public-private partnership. And then where we have availability of the loops, we don't have anything to the home yet. But if we were to go forward with some of the loops that already exist and get to the home service, then somebody needs to run that. Somebody would need to manage the operations of that plant. So really, I think really the major thing that this group needs to do is explore this public-private partnership opportunities and explore a coalition with other communities. We really feel really strongly that we do not want taxpayers to be on the hook for construction of this network. We want subscribers to be paying for the construction of the network. And we had originally thought that we would be able to do like some bonding or some separate funding separate from the regular town budget. But what we've learned in the last couple of years is that to funding really, the way to fund it is, if you're going to bond it, it was general obligation bonds from the town. It would have to go through debt exclusion and be backed by the tax base. And we don't really want to do that. So really, there's an opportunity here for this public-private partnership, but we need somebody to be able to research that, negotiate with the partners, talk to other communities. It really needs to be somebody who's kind of exploring that for real and is tasked with doing that. So the select board doesn't have the capacity to focus on the activity. So I think I'm just going to pause because I think I now have a quorum. So we have myself and Renee just joined, and Duncan and David. So if it's okay with you, Karen, I would like to call and Keith just joined. So I definitely have a quorum now.
Please do.
Okay, so I'm going to call the meeting to order for the Internet Advisory Committee. So there we go. Thank you.
It's
So
just for the record.
Yeah, so joining me, we have Keith Novo is the IT director for the town. David Cole can probably answer lots more questions than I could about this. And then we have Renee Kochman, who's on the committee. And then obviously Duncan Law is your representative on the committee. So kind of moving back. So this David Cole has done a heroic effort of trying to find grants and Keith too, Keith and David, looking for grants. We're looking for opportunities with other communities. We're started to talk about some public-private partnerships, but we really need somebody tasked with doing this as like their responsibility. The select board just doesn't have the capacity to focus on it. And there's really too many issues before the select board for them to be able to really give it the full attention that they need. If it's elected, then you can have accountability for that to the taxpayer, or to the voters anyway, of people. You're electing people who are going to pursue what the voters want them to pursue. So the eventual hiring and management of the system is going to require a board. Eventually, if you started running it, or when you started running it, you would hire a company to oversee the operations and management, and you'd hire a director, but the board would be the ones kind of deciding on that model. I want to be really clear. I know we've said this like on every time the municipal light plant has come before people, but it doesn't mean we have to move forward with the project. It's what we need is focused attention on how to move the project forward and whether it's even possible to move the project forward. So this is not authorizing anybody to spend any money. All authorization of funding still has to go through town meeting, just like every other appropriation in town. But it would mean that you're getting people focused on the issue. So that's why we're proposing it's being elected. Just in full disclosure, I actually have some reservations about this. I actually think there might be some value in it being an appointed board, because then you could actually guarantee certain criteria for the people that are there. So I think there's still some conversation that could be had about whether the municipal light board should be elected or whether it should be appointed. But this would give us the capacity, the ability to have it be elected. So I'm going to just ask Keith, did I miss anything key there that you want to add?
No, not yet. I think you're right on so far.
And then David, how about you? Did I miss a key factor here? David's on mute, so I'm not sure if he's. Okay, so that's what I had, Karen. So I don't know if you want me
All
to.
right. Thank you.
I'm gonna call him people.
Well, Hugh has his hand up, and I'll let Hugh go first.
Oh wait, I think David is typing in.
Oh,
Here.
David's.
I'm sorry, I was muted.
Oh, hi, David.
I think this is a next step forward. As Shanna has said, it doesn't, it's not crossing the Rubicon, it's just moving towards it. And we have had 2 votes in town meeting, overwhelming votes in favor of moving in this direction. And so this is bringing to the next town meeting the kind of the next step. And it's following in the pattern of other towns that have gone before us and repeating the patterns that they followed. And so I think it's meeting our commitment to the town meeting voters who wanted us to move in this direction. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Anyone else from the committee?
Is this the appropriate time?
I think so, Hugh. You've got the floor now. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to say I'm reassured by this. I'm not sure I agree with David that the town was all in favor of this. They were voting to have something stay alive to be considered further in the future, I think. But having said that, I'm reassured that this is not a case where the town is going to be issuing a bunch of financing for this and that. I see this as basically an enshrinement of the current committee. I mean, different personnel being so forth, which really is an entity which will be available to contract with people who will finance, compare, and so forth, if in fact there are those people around. So on that basis, I'm not opposed to the project per se. It was a question of financing and how all that would play out, and this reassures me that the town is not going to be in the hook, but there'll be an entity which can make arrangements with people to provide the service if and as and when they are around. That's fine.
Anything else, Hugh, at the moment?
No, I think that was what I wanted
Okay,
to say.
great. Thank you. Cindy, go ahead.
I agree with Shauna about the little bit of a concern about appointed versus elected. Is there such a thing as a hybrid board that you could have elected officials and include appointed officials to have a hybrid board? I mean, we have seen disasters in the past of, a popularity contest that manages to occupy a position of importance that turns out to be not suitable for the responsibility that the position would require. So, you know, there are concerns about that. I'm assuming that right now, since there's no funding, that this board would not have any salary attached to it, or any funding for any compensation for that board. So, you know, maybe there wouldn't be a line out the door for people to try to run for it. But, you know, people have different motives involved, and so I think there's reason for concern to make sure that you have qualified people in this position.
Yeah, I myself am mixed feelings about it, right? I know when we were talking about a different similar board that I don't think made it onto the warrant. There was a lot of talk about, and Jim might be able to elaborate on this more, about the kind of, if you go with the select board doing it, the select board is like the default. So the select board would be the people, unless you negotiate other ways. But maybe Jim, when we were talking about that other committee, we had like option B, option 2B or something like that. Can you maybe talk a little bit, Jim, about if it was appointed, like what that mechanism is, assuming it was the same as for that other committee?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it is the same, right? I don't know either way, but with the sewer commission, the commission would be either appointed or it could be set up so that it could be the select board, or it could be elected. That would be by vote at an annual town election. So that's not even town meeting, that gets sent to town election for the sewer commission. But I think the sewer commission is specific in their regulations.
Yeah. So what would happen here is if this passed at town meeting, then it would go before the voters in the next April election. So you're talking about a delay there.
Could I comment on that? I think that the legislation, as I've read it, authorizes only either an appointed board or an elected board. And if you don't enact this authorization of an elected board now, then by default, the choice is for an appointed board. And I can share Shauna's concern about you may get some people on there who are not the best people for the board, but it's a 5-person board and it's still going to take a majority to enact things. And I think the chances of getting 3 people on a board like that who are all going in the wrong direction is a black mark on our voters if that were to happen. But I think it's a way of trying to find people who are really devoted, interested in working on this. And I've been following the model of Falmouth, and I think they've gone through a very effective process of having an election for board, and they've gotten people who all have some particular expertise or interest in it. And we've got some people here who have that same kind of thing on the Internet Advisory Committee. Renee Kochman is involved very much in the work of the town of Fall River on their internet systems. And Paul Junkus is a member of the advisory committee, also heavily involved in this. And Keith Novo is too. I don't know exactly whether town employees could be elected for this. That's something to be looked at. But I think we can find people here in our community that are knowledgeable and dedicated and wanting to see this move forward and done right. And this would open up the way to do that. And the other thing is, it doesn't have to take place at the next town public election. I think that the select board has the authority to put things on the ballot, and authorizing this by this passing of this article would not necessarily imply or require a timed response. My sense is that it could be done at the time when the select board thought that we were ready to do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do
That answered my question. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to underscore one of Cindy's point. Nobody's asking for any money for this department right now. I wouldn't advocate for this group actually managing the entity. Like once you started rolling out and providing service, I wouldn't think this group would do that either. The group would hire somebody to do that whose profession was doing that.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Al. You're on mute, Al.
There we
you
are.
go.
Yep. I'm back. Just a quick question. Is there any way of renaming this municipal light board to something that people understand?
Not really. The legislation that enacted it is the municipal light plant, and so it has a municipal light board. But I agree, it's kind of goofy. It's very old fashioned.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, at least for the town's perspective, if we could get another name and then in parentheses, municipal light board, legislated by blah, 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 blah. Because I've had a number of people, I don't want to say, an overwhelming, but a number of people that have asked me, and I said, I don't have a clue. So it's just a comment more than anything else.
David, did you have a comment about that?
Yeah, I think Taunton has found a way of labeling the company so that it makes clear that it's a broadband only company, and I think we could do that. And so, but for the action that has to be taken under the law, I think we need to follow this nomenclature. But once we establish it, they can change their name as they see fit.
Okay.
That would be my understanding. We may want to check that with our lawyers, but I think that's easily done.
Okay. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Al. So I want to share my sentiment that I have had the same question and a little concerns about it being an elected position, elected board versus an appointed board, because the select board, what you just even said, Shauna, you've been on the committee for a couple of years and you're saying, we want subscribers and we want to do this. Well, that all changes potentially if you have an elected board that you don't have the authority to oversight to, right? So that changes all of that. But my one question that I have on this potentially elected board and even future elected boards, I question, should we be allowing or having multiple elected officials who are elected officials on other boards to also be allowed on different boards? Because you start to get a little bit of a concentration of power there. And I think one way that could be avoided is if this was if it was a paid board, even if it was maybe a small amount. So, because I think the way that works from my following the conflict of interest policy, that an elected official cannot sit on two different elected boards if both are paid. And I'm just wondering if you've given thought to that on that.
I didn't know that, so I had not thought about that at all.
Just something to consider.
Yeah.
Hugh, did you have your hand up?
I did, but I just want to echo what Al said in a sense. Part of my initial caution about all of this was the idea we're creating an entity that will start running the electrical service for the town. That is not true, and I understand that, but that's after we've been discussing this, etc. And the man on the street may well have the reaction that Al had. Not only, I don't know what this is about, but I'm not in favor of the town going into the electric light business. There's no idea if that will happen, but I can see how people will assume that might be the case.
So one thing I think that might help people feel better is the entity cannot spend money, just like the select board can't spend money, right? It has to be appropriated at town meeting, and it has to be source of revenue that's described at town meeting, right? So They, once you are operating the entity and you're getting operating income and that kind of thing, it kind of works like an enterprise fund. I don't think it's exactly an enterprise fund. It's basically an enterprise fund. And so there's no authority to spend any money. So you can't really build much of a plant without spending any kind of money. I think David wanted to answer that.
Yeah, but just one more point. I just looked it up, and Falmouth is called theirs the Falmouth Broadband MLP.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
There you
So,
Yeah.
Sounds much nicer.
Yeah.
I think that would be good for us to do that.
Yeah.
If we call it the Westport Broadband MLP.
I agree.
No, I completely agree with that as well. I just, it's too confusing for people, and whether or not there's spending authority or not, that's a separate issue. It's just the concept of when people get a letter in the mail and they're talking about, or they're reading about a municipal light board, it just goes right over their head, and mine as well. So, yeah. Okay.
I
Great.
thought Dave was going to talk, but he looks frozen now. Renee.
Go ahead, Renee.
There we go.
You're on mute. There you go.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think, even broadband may go over people's heads, but I do think it's an opportunity to do some education, maybe get the cable TV people involved and maybe producing some infomercials to educate people on what this broadband MLP will be tasked with. And I think it's just like anything else that's new. We need to educate people as to what this is about. So I think that might be a way to do that.
Thank you, Renee. Go ahead, David.
Just I'd add that the attendees at town meeting didn't seem to have any confusion. The vote was 180 to 12 at the last session to set up this municipal light plant. But I think it pays to relabel it the broadband MLP or the fiber optic MLP, something that makes clear what it is, that it's a very different entity and providing very different services from what already exists. And it's not a light plant.
Great, David. I just want to reiterate Hugh's comment that he made about previous town meetings, and I would agree that I think the previous two town meeting votes were more administrative and rudimentary than anything, so there wasn't anything to be opposed about because there was no dollars, there's no nothing. So I think we're a long way away from thinking that meeting is a total support for the project, but we'll see whenever the dollars get associated to it, that will tell. Go ahead, Al.
No, excuse me. I'm just going to tag on to what you just said. 180 to 12 means 192 votes at a town meeting. There are 16,000 people in this town, and that has nothing to do with anybody in this room or anybody else. But the fact is that it is not it's a clear majority of the town meeting of people that attended, but it's certainly not an overwhelming mandate from the people in the town overall. So that was just my comment.
I'll just chime in again. With what Karen said a minute ago, this was presented as this is doing nothing. We need to do this to keep the door open for doing things in the future. No reason to vote against it, but voting for it was routine and didn't mean anything, in my view. And that's why this is, in many ways, a blank check, which is fine. I say I'm not opposing this in the least. I'm just saying I wouldn't count on that vote as meaning much of anything because the issue was advertised as not meaning anything. We just need to do this to be able to do it again at some point in the future.
Can I just add one thing?
Sure
We had a previous townwide survey covering And then we had response of about 10% of the residents and also 10% of the businesses. And the results of that survey came out very strongly in support of moving ahead with this program. So it isn't just the vote in town meeting. That's the one that's more clearly recordable, but the survey got the same results. So I think they reinforced each other. That's my point.
I just want to say I appreciate what David's saying, but I also appreciate what the rest of you are saying. It was kind of administrative thing. It didn't mean that people wanted to pay money. Like if it was free, sure. If it was free and they wave the magic wand, everybody sign up, right? But it isn't, and we don't know how. Even the Internet Advisory Committee is not certain that we're going to be able to meet our goal of saying, no, we don't want taxpayers to be on the hook for this. We want subscribers to be on the hook for this. And if we can't do that, then even the Internet Advisory Committee isn't really for going forward, right? We're trying to do what we say. I do want to float one more thing that came up super briefly on the select board when we were talking about the warrant articles is maybe Jim remembered. I don't know if the sewer commission is actually on the warrant or not, or if we took that off, but there was the idea that there was also kind of a very similar article to create a sewer commission to kind of manage the sewer side of things. And we did have a kind of a brief conversation about, could they be the same? Could you have like an infrastructure board or something? But you really cannot, because the sewer commission has a very specific legal language and responsibilities, and the MLP has very specific legal language and that kind of thing. So, because I did think, well, it would be better if you'd have like one entity responsible for infrastructure, but it wasn't the way that they're laid out. You can't really do that. Not for the elected committees anyway.
Great, thank you. Does anyone else have anything? Mr. Unknown, which I believe that's Gary.
So this might be a little too soon to answer. I mean, maybe we don't have the answer to these questions, but as it starts to roll out and starts to maybe come to fruition, people are going to want to know what the costs are and who's going to maintain this infrastructure and what that costs. Has there been any discussion of that, or?
Sure, of course, it's in your packet. Actually, there's some information in your packet about some of that. Let me see if I can find the right page. Sure, here's the projected cost really depends on the take rate. So the take rate is what percentage of people, eligible residents pick it up. So you can see at a 50% take rate, we're estimating about $76 a month for subscribers. There's more information about in the packet about like build out costs and things like that.
So who will maintain this? What
department? It would be a private, the maintenance operation. You can see there's a maintenance and operations. This would be something that the municipal light board would most likely contract with somebody to provide those services.
Is that based on these costs right here?
That was when we projected it at the time. This was the maintenance and operations. Yeah.
So the last question I have is, what other towns have been successful in this endeavor in Massachusetts?
David, you want to take that, because I don't remember.
Yeah, there are roughly 400 towns across the country. I think there probably are 40 or 50 in Massachusetts, and some of them are gathered together in groups. There's a Whip City Fiber program that covers a number of very small towns in the western part of the state. And then there are other towns around here, Quincy and has done it, and Taunton has a system. So I can give you specific information, but there are a lot of them that have done it. And in Vermont, they have a very strong state-supported program, and they have many towns that have joined a cooperative program that they're doing up there. So it's become very much a common practice now, and happening more and more, and different sources of financing from the feds and the state that are trying to feed into that process.
So these are communities that have fully vetted the whole process. They actually have it implemented, and they
Yeah.
have subscribers.
Yes, yes.
And out of those communities that have done that, are those communities self-supportive? Have the residents that opt to go into this program, have they paid that on their own? Has the town come in?
Yes. Yeah, it's been funded without town funding. It's funded by the subscribers, and and their prices are pretty consistently well below the prices of the existing private internet service providers.
But Gary, this is also one of the reasons we want to look into public-private partnerships so that we can kind of de-risk the town and de-risk the construction costs by engaging a partner to help with that. Now they share some of the profits, but that's one of the funding mechanisms that really needs to be looked at a little bit more detail. And also a cooperative with other communities, because you can attract a better partner if you have more subscribers, right? So there's also, this is what we really need, somebody dedicated to look at some of these different options to fund it.
Yeah, and out of the communities that you've mentioned, how many are the same contract services that we have? I mean, are we comparing Charter to maybe Comcast? Are the ones that the people that the communities that you're speaking of, are they Charter already? Are some of those Charter?
Yes, some of them are Charter. Yes, and in most cases they've gotten a very strong response in favor of moving ahead with the municipally owned to replace the private internet service providers. And
the last thing, the fear I have with all this is not the fact that it couldn't work, but that we implement this or it gets implemented and then Charter comes in and says, okay, I'm just making up a number. You're offering this at $50 a month. We're now going to offer it at $40 a month.
Yeah, the important thing here is that the Charter isn't going to. To get the fiber broadband to the home, you have infrastructure that has to be installed, right? And they've been unwilling to do that right now because it doesn't make fiscal sense for them to do that. Now, it is one of the things that I had is there might be new technologies in the future, right, that would supplant it. So maybe your satellite internet is getting really awesome, and then you don't really need physical cabling. But we also, in your appendix here, we had some conversation about that, about I'm gonna find the right slide. So when you compare, like, Starlink is 150 millibytes per second, fiber is much larger. You can see the comparison. This is the circle. But I think that I don't think Charter is going to be the problem. I look at whether, if you don't need lines to the home anymore, then that might be where your conflict comes in. But there's no indication that the technology where you don't actually need a hard cable to the home is anywhere close to the capacity of fiber.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
Great. Go ahead, Hugh.
I just want to say these are all good points, etc., but they're way premature.
Yeah.
We're talking about creating an entity to negotiate something with somebody, somehow doing something. And
exactly.
We get around to that, then these are good questions to focus on, because I'm not so sure it's going to be as easy as people think, but that's fine. It'll play out because Charter, which is also Spectrum, same organization, provides cable, TV, and telephone as well. So you're going to have a pick. If you're a present customer taking everything from Charter, from Spectrum, it may or may not be in your interest to sign up for this if it's simply going to be internet access, and maybe it will be. But that'll all play out when there's actually a rabbit for the pot that is thinking about coming into town and making an arrangement. Now they're fine questions, but I think we're not going to answer any of them tonight.
Right, and that is not in front of us tonight. So if anybody has any other questions, I'd love to wrap this up at this point. Anything else? No?
So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the Internet Advisory Committee.
I'll
Someone on my committee.
I'll
Yeah,
second that. Sorry, I was on mute.
And I think, do we have to roll call vote?
Yes, you
I
do.
think we do. So I'm gonna, so it's the motion to, we have a motion to adjourn the Internet Advisory Committee. David,
Yeah, I
think you have to say your name.
David Cole.
Duncan,
You're on mute, Duncan.
Hi, Duncan Love.
Keith, and then Renee.
Keith Novo, aye.
Renee,
I, Renee Kochman.
and I, Shauna Sheepfellows. Thank you very much for having us here.
Thank you very much for coming. Appreciate it. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
All right. Thank you. Okay, so Jim is here. Thank you, Jim. How are you?
Doing well, thanks.
Good, 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 good. So I think we appreciate your being here because there's a lot of warrant articles that I think you can give us a couple of minute explanation, which will help us immensely. And I think Cindy had talked to you about a few of them. Cindy, do you happen to have a list handy that we can kind of, we don't need to go through every warrant
Yes,
article with you
Just give me
tonight.
one second. I just
Yeah,
have to
sure
grab
thing.
my notebook. Yep.
Yeah, sure thing. Jim, and while you're finding that, Jim, is the warrant going to be finalized at the next select board meeting where all the remaining holes are going to be filled in? Do you anticipate that at the next meeting?
We're still working on it right now. It's just a few transfers and a couple of other minor things, but I think for the most part, everything's there.
Okay,
It's been sent to town council for review and we're going to hear back from them.
okay, okay. Well, those should be easy ones for us to vote on quickly once they're finalized. But I'd like to try to get through as many as we can because we do have a couple of bigger warrant articles that we're still talking about. You got your list, Cindy?
Yes, I do. So the first one was Article 21. I mean, I'm assuming that the transfer, the prior year bills, we still don't have information on that. So there's nothing for us to discuss currently. That was still kind of a question when we met. But the first one that we had a question on was Article 21, which I do not have the warrant in front of me, but I will pull it up.
Yep, Article 21, I'll read the little snippet. Article 21 is to appropriate $141,620 from Fund 20 account for purposes of financing repair, replacement, or upgrade of septic systems.
So my understanding is these funds, the 141,000 was put aside for septic systems if nitrogen reducing systems were installed. They want to remove it from there so that it can be used for regular septic upgrades without nitrogen systems. So this is kind of
really
like
just removing-
this was a grant.
removing
The revolving loan, isn't it?
Yes.
Isn't this the revolving loan? Okay.
Great. Before we go on, I had circled Article 19 as well for Jim, which was to rescind the amount of 211,000 approved under Article 13, Article 38 of the June 5th, 2021 town meeting.
Yeah, Sue's on this one. I'm going to let her take it, but go ahead, Sue.
Go ahead, Sue.
Just needed to unmute. Rescind the borrowing, that was Snell Creek. We funded that through a grant, so we do not need to borrow.
Great, thank you. Gary, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Just a quick question to Jim on the septic systems for the failed septic systems. In the past, what was that article, or was the intention to do any septic system? And if we change that just to nitrogen septic systems, is that something new?
So the wording before was specific for nitrogen septic systems. So they're removing that additional requirement to allow people that you just need upgrades on their septic systems and nitrogen is not required, it would allow them to use that money for that as well. And making it less restrictive.
Okay, thanks.
Great, thank you.
That article, the septic, that was originally a grant given to the town for low-income people who needed to repair septic systems. And it was a revolving, the funds were to be put back in, paid back in, and so forth. My understanding is they wanted, I'm trying to think what happened exactly, but it was also still, they put it D-night. I think they had kind of forgotten that the funds were there, so they kind of activated it again, but they wanted it only D-night systems. But my understanding is it is still supposed to be low income funded for people who need it.
Either way, Sue, that we record that as a lien on the registry, correct?
Correct.
Okay, that's that, as long as the town is protected against that, that's good.
So that's, I just want to clarify, this is all, we're talking about Article 22.
Correct.
Right? Right.
21 and 22.
Oh, it's 21 and 22, so they're both connected. Okay.
Yeah.
Ah, thank you. Thank you for that. Okay. I was thinking we were talking about 21 and then I saw the 22. Okay. Thank you. I think we can move on to the next one. I think, Cindy, I think probably on our list, it's articles 24 and 25 seem to be connected in a sense. And so,
yes.
So Sue's going to correct me if I'm wrong, but the 93,000 and the 9,000 in Article 24 were appropriated and set aside to the Capital Stabilization Fund at last year's town meeting. But the DOR had some questions about it because it was originally set aside for the 93 was for the middle school remediation of the PCBs, and the 9,000 was leftover money from the police station. So they want those two funding, those $2 amounts, the 93 and the 9,000, to be specific to building construction. So they're coming out of the Capitalization Stabilization Fund, and then the next articles puts them back specific to those uses. They can only be used for buildings. We can't buy any equipment with them.
Does this require a 2/3 vote at town meeting?
It's a good question. I believe it does, but I'll confirm that. So there's been some recent changes in these stabilization accounts, but I don't think it impacts this one.
Right. Right. Some are just majority right now. Some of them.
I know the special yes, a couple of them are.
Right.
Do we have to, Karen, I just got a question on this. Do we have to, when we rescind this and then put it back in, are we allowed to put it back to another capital expense, or does it have to go to free cash and then the source of funds is free cash?
These are actually going into articles. So it's coming out of the stabilization and it's going into an article. So we would be able to expend those funds on a building improvement as long as it met the requirements of the article.
Okay, so it's not going from one capital account to another capital account.
That's correct.
Okay.
great. Well, that does explain it. So that 5 minutes was very helpful. Thank you, Jim. And Sue.
The next one is Article 26, similar.
So 26 was the second piece to that, right? So that was the 9,000.
Right.
So Article 24 was breaking it out into 25 and 26.
Correct. The next one we had a question on was Article 28 regarding the size of the lot and the tax impact.
Oh, you know what, Cindy? Some of the numbers have been renumbered. So we've got
okay.
to,
well, no, I have 28. It's the size of the lot. 27 is kind of straightforward. I think with new.
No, the current warrant renumbered the articles. So in the new warrant.
Oh, I have the 8th draft. I have draft number 8. Isn't that the most recent?
I do too, but Article 28 in that is the Cherry and Webb.
Yeah.
It's the 15,000 for beach enterprise. Right. Oh, is that the one you're on?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's
Okay.
purchasing, it's purchasing land from Beach Enterprise. We wanted to know what type of piece of property it was. That was our question.
Great, thank you. Sorry.
So it's a relatively small piece. It's probably about half or 3/4 underwater. We've looked at it on the square footage exactly, but it's right where residents of Westport sit when they go to the Cherry and Webb Beach. There's probably 3 or 4 privately owned parcels that are half underwater and maybe half on the beach. Kind of landlocked. They do show some paper roads going to them, but there is no access. I believe the beach committee has talked to the owner. The owner is willing to sell it, and they wanted, I think, somewhere around the range of $10,000 for the parcel, and the remaining funds would be used for legal costs, recording fees, title search if needed.
Go ahead, Hugh.
You're on mute.
You're muted, Hugh. You're still
You're on
muted,
mute.
Hugh.
Sorry, I was saying, I believe this comes out of the beach funds.
Yes.
And no appropriation from other funds, so it's basically they've got the money already, it's just a matter of repurposing it.
Next article was number 29. This is the fence issue, 49,000 from Beach Enterprise, but we wanted to know some additional detail about the fence issue. Jim, you have any additional information on that?
Just they're looking for, I think it was 25,000 roughly for the fence, and the remainder for a vehicle for the beach. This would be to replace the fence in between, I guess, on the east side of the laneway that goes down to Cherry and Webb. It's in very poor condition. I think that the people there on the east side have been relatively good neighbors over the years, and there wasn't an official agreement, but there was a letter dating back, I think, to the 70s where the town had agreed to put up and maintain a fence.
Okay, the next one is Article 31, and this is also regarding some land.
These are two land,
right, conservation, right.
These are 2 landlocked parcels that are currently owned by the town, and they're north of the St. Vincent's property that's currently owned by the Land Trust. A lot of wetlands on both. One has a significant amount of wetlands. Like I said, they're landlocked. I don't see any development potential in the future, but you never know. They're just too far off of Adamsville Road, and there's conservation land on the south side of it, so the likelihood that they'd be developed is minimal at best. Town currently owns them. By transferring them to the Conservation Commission, it puts them under Article 97 and kind of puts a restriction on ourselves essentially, so that it remains as open space and recreation. And the Land Trust has agreed to work with the Conservation Commission to extend the trails and to link some of their other properties in that area.
It's really a de facto conveyance to the Land Trust in a sense, which is fine.
Thank you.
I'll skip over 33. At the time when we last met, we did not have this language, so I think that's planning board issue information about bylaws. So the next one I have is 40, because we did not have any of this language to discuss on the new bylaws. So we're going to skip all the way to 40. So let me just catch up here, because there's a lot of stuff here in this.
Yeah.
35, 7, 3 minute.
A lot of pages to get there.
A lot of boy, a lot of pages. No kidding. I keep going. I keep going.
I know.
So I think 40 is the alcohol license request, right?
Oh, right. Okay, yeah, so this, yeah, Jim, you had explained this to me. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we have a limit on the number of, I guess, package store all alcohol licenses that we can issue here in town. The owner of 634 has filed a petition requesting that, actually, he's filed a request that the Board of Selectmen put this on the town meeting warrant, to request special legislation to get an additional license for an all alcoholic beverage license for 634 American Legion Highway.
This would result in a nominal increase in whatever the cost of the license is to the town. Whatever revenue the town gets from an additional license, correct?
Yeah, which is, I'm going to say probably $1,000, $1,200, somewhere in that range.
Great, thank you. Oh, Al, go ahead. You've got your hand up.
just a quickie, and I have no skin in this game, but the address to put in perspective is the mobile gas station, and on Route 177. It is right next door to Harry's, that has been operating a successful business. I don't know whether it's successful, but has been operating a clean business for 20, 25 years, 30 years, something like that. And so this would in fact impact somebody that's been paying taxes and operating 14 hours a day, taking nothing away from the gas station. But if you're a gas station and a convenience store, that's your business. And so I just want to say that it's a questionable call. I'm not calling it one way or the other, but it's questionable.
Al, I'd add to, I think you tweaked my memory. This came up a couple of years ago. The same argument, it was voted down by the town. So this is another bite at the apple.
Right.
I don't think we should be in favor of, for the reason you indicate. It's already been decided once by the town.
Yeah, you're correct. That's sort of my point. I think that I don't know if it was last town meeting or the town meeting before that. I think the town voted no to give them the additional capacity to sell liquor there.
Which is why it's back. That's right. I agree.
Yeah.
This one actually feels really not financial in nature, and this wouldn't be one that we make a recommendation in either case to.
I think you're right.
I think you're right about that, Karen. It's not financial in nature.
Right.
All right. The next one is Article 41. This is regarding some parcels of land that FL Tripp and Sons would like to donate to the town. And surprisingly, it is nowhere near the water.
Really?
This is a piece of land that was divided into two when Route 88 was put in back in the late 50s. A piece of this land, and we went over the acreage earlier, but it's decent size. It butts the transfer station, the town landfill to the north. So, in that sense, I think there's value in accepting that parcel of land. It's always good to acquire land around, I think, any transfer station or landfill, even to cut back on liability in the future. But so that's one. And the other one is on the other side of the highway. It's a triangular piece. Doesn't have a lot of benefit to anybody, but if you're going to accept one, you might as well accept both. And it's probably one that they stop paying taxes and eventually end up with going to the town.
Tax revenue, but I expect that's nominal to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we checked. It was a couple $100, if it was even that much.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you.
Okay, the next one, that was 41. The next one is 42. This is by petition.
So this is
Rita Lane.
Rita Lane Extension. This was a subdivision that was approved by the planning board. The road was constructed. They're now requesting that it be accepted.
It's off of White Oak Run.
It's off of White Oak Run.
Right.
So it goes White Oak Run, and then off of White Oak Run is Rita Lane, which has been accepted. And then this extends Rita Lane. And this would be the part that they're requesting acceptance.
So the question is it up to spec and everything no burden on the town other than the usual.
That's my understanding, with the exception that I think the planning board is recommending against accepting it because White Oak Lane is not accepted by the town, which is interesting. White Oak Lane is not accepted. Rita Lane is accepted, that comes off of White Oak Lane, and then this piece is an extension of Rita Lane. I'd also say White Oak Lane may not be officially accepted, but it's been maintained, paved over the years by the town, and this goes way back. I know it's been paved for, it was gravel at one point, but it's been paved for a number of years. So whether it's officially accepted or not, you know, that's a good question. I don't know.
It's a difficult precedent. Okay, 43 is the next one. This is the special education fund.
Yeah, so this would set up a stabilization fund for special education. And the difference with this fund from other stabilization funds is it's designed so that if school department or a school takes in special education students mid-year and didn't have the funding for that, if they get approval from the Board of Selectmen and approval from the school committee, they could draw down on this fund mid-year without going to town meeting. Town meeting would have to appropriate the funds into the stabilization account, but as it's worded right now, school committee and Board of Selectmen would have the authority to release funds mid-year to offset some of those costs.
But Jim, where would the initial funding come from?
So
That's my question.
what's proposed here is in the following article. Last year, the school department requested, I think, $85,000 to upgrade their elementary school master clock paging system. And instead of doing hard wiring, they did what do you call
Wireless.
it? Wireless.
Right.
They did wireless, and they were able to do it and save about $55,000. So the thought would be to put that $55,000 into the stabilization account,
Which otherwise would have fallen into free cash.
would have to be reappropriated and could go into free cash. Yes.
Can we, before we keep going on the future articles, I wanted to go back to the stabilization fund itself. So as Jim mentioned, an article would have to put funds into the special education fund at town meeting in an article, just as any other stabilization. But as Jim mentioned, to take money out, it is the select board and the school committee only. So the other stabilization funds require town meeting at a 2/3 vote to take money out of the account. My suggestion has been, is there any way, and the state law allows the select board and the school committee to do that. My suggestion has been that I think there needs a little more oversight to that. And my suggestion is if there's a way that we can write into the bylaws that it also requires a finance committee approval as well.
So I had sent all the articles to town council for review. That's one of the questions we have. I don't have an answer for that.
Okay. Great, thank you.
So that was really.
So Jim, one second, Cindy. No. So if they did get back that it was possible, would we have to do that in a motion on town floor to add that? Is that how?
Yeah, the select board could, I guess, amend the article prior to posting. Or an amendment at town meeting.
Oh, okay. Oh, so select board could amend the article. Okay. Okay. Zach just mentioned, Duncan, you've got some feedback on your mic. If you could mute. Thank you. Thanks, Zach.
I was trying to do it discreetly, Karen.
No, it's okay. That's all right. It's helpful. All right, so
and
thank you for
that was really it. We covered 44. That was the
well. I did want to now talk about 44 because we kind of did. We kind of were blended the two together. So just as Hugh had mentioned, so that 55,000 would have otherwise gone to free cash. The other alternative is it doesn't go into the special education fund, it could go into a capital stabilization fund. So it's really taking capital that wasn't used and putting it back to capital. Why did we choose this special education stabilization fund? To try to give it some dollars, to get some dollars in there?
Yeah, I think the thought was that if we're going to create the fund, we need to put some money in there, and this was just one source of funding that was originally going to the schools. Albeit for a capital project, it still was intended for the schools, and maybe a good place to put it.
Okay. Gary, go ahead.
Yeah, this is only an opinion, my personal opinion on this. Boards change, committees change, and there may be a likelihood down the road that they may not want to use that money for the purpose. I think town meetings should be the ones that decide that. Town meeting, on like 2/3 vote on the regular stabilization, should also be the ones who determine how the money is spent. I don't think that two boards, although they may want to recommend it and they may want to support it, are the ones that decide whether or not that money is spent.
Well, it can only be used for special education purposes. It can only be used for tuition and transportation.
Right.
It can't be used for anything else.
But boards and committees change. So my point is they may not want to do it. Or one year they may, even though the intention is for that, they may not want to do that. It's just a point.
Yeah, I agree. I think just having some more level of oversight in whether, I know there's a lot of times there's going to be a sense of urgency where the school may need these funds rather quickly. So to go to a town meeting might not be an easy thing to do, but if it could be expedited, if it was the school committee, the select board, and the finance committee, at least that's why I'm suggesting the finance committee, because there's a level of oversight there, rather than going to a special town meeting to get the funds. But
Hey, Jim, going back to what you were saying earlier about how if you're taking something out of an article that had a specific purpose, that you couldn't use it, you had to use it for a capital purpose. So this article, the original elementary master clock paging system, was a capital expense for, there was a capitalizable expense for the school. And in this case, we're taking it out of that and putting it into something that would be a regular expense item versus capital expense. So you had mentioned earlier that, you couldn't do one versus the other. It had to be of a similar nature. Is there an exception on this?
So my understanding is the previous two was borrowed money. So that was authorized, and that is being treated differently. In the past, we've taken warrant articles for numerous reasons, and then following, in subsequent town meetings, we've repurposed the remaining funds in those warrant articles for other uses.
That makes sense, because we've capitalized the expense of the borrowing, so you can't now diminish that. Right. Okay. All right. That kind of makes sense. I got you. Okay.
Great. Thank you for that, Jim. I have a couple of quick questions circling back to Article 4, which is the budget. Is there anything that you're still waiting on that we need to wait for? Are you comfortable with the diamond assessments and health insurance and everything that we're waiting on? Is there anything else?
Yeah, we're still waiting on the state aid, right? But we won't, right now we're working off the governor's budget. I think we're pretty close. I think we have all we're going to have. I don't have Bristol Aggie yet. I'm still waiting on that.
Did they give you any sense of when that might come?
No, and they're not consistent year to year. I did follow up a couple of weeks ago. I will follow up again to see if we can get those numbers.
Is there any indication when the next round of the state aid would come? They don't release any dates, do they?
I would expect the House budget to come out fairly soon. we usually get that, you know, probably around the end of March, and we usually get the, I think the senator's budget, you know, right around town meeting, and then the final budget in June.
Okay.
You know,
Well,
I think our numbers are pretty close. I think
Yeah.
the big numbers that we were concerned about, you know, like the Chapter 70, the school choice, the charter schools that have changed a bit this year, are formula based for the most part, so those shouldn't change much. The unrestricted local aid, government aid, that can change a little bit, but you know, I think we budgeted, or we're fairly conservative in our estimates. Not real conservative, but pretty comfortable where we are.
Yeah. Okay.
Karen,
Thank you.
what are we budgeting for the marijuana? Are we putting anything in the budget, Jim? Have you used any? Nothing?
We get 3%. Our pilots I have not put in. Does not look like we're going to be able to collect those.
Yeah.
But the 3% I believe is in there.
Yeah, I know there's some. I think they're balking at the whole issue of it being being unconstitutional, that it's being taxed, blah blah blah. So you're only putting the tax in, basically.
That's it. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Great. So Jim, we don't need to approve the budget tonight, but I think our committee can kind of get it in a semi-formal standpoint, and then we can just wait to see if anything comes through. So the other question that I had on Article 4 was related to the water and sewer. If we needed a debt payment in Article 4 or not. Do you have any sense of that?
So Sue did a nice job looking this up, and we can get around that, so it does not impact the budget.
Okay.
You know, and just timing wise, if everything went perfect and we awarded the contract in June and July, by the time they mobilize and get going, you're looking at this fall. Then winter comes, so not a lot of work gets done. So, you know, I don't see a significant amount of work being done until next spring when it starts up. And so there should not be a big expenditure. You know, we have pump stations that take time to order and come in. So.
Okay.
Yeah, but Sue did check into that. She wrote me an email today, and I can forward that to you. Get some a little bit more detail.
All right. Well, if you're comfortable that we're covered on our budget, then that's good for me on that end on that conversation. So thank you.
Karen, so a question on that. Just a question on that, maybe for clarification. That wouldn't impact the general fund budget, anyways. That would impact some enterprise fund budget.
It would.
We don't have an enterprise fund for that yet. There's
Right.
no money in
So
it.
how would water and sewer, my question is, how would water and sewer infrastructure impact a general fund budget?
The
So it
borrow.
wouldn't, right? The debt exclusion would be separate, right? And then, I'm going to let Sue explain rather than me making a costly error.
Right. And before Sue explains, right? So the way that it was presented to us, the $35 million is separated into 29 million, which would be debt exclusion, and 6 million would be non-excluded debt, which would be the betterment piece. And so I was referring to the $6 million piece, not the debt exclusion piece, but go ahead. You can take it away, Sue. So,
okay, assuming that we want to get going on this, everything's approved at the ballot, town meeting, and so forth, and we borrow, say, in July, normally we would have a debt, at least an interest payment due in January, but they could structure the loan so that the first payment would be due a year from July, but it would inflate the amount due in fiscal 26, because it would be July 25. Fiscal 26 would have an inflated amount that year because it would be the full year of interest that would be due in July of the following July. If we borrow in this July, we'd have a full year of interest due in next fiscal year. Yep.
So yeah, so this is Gary. I understand the funding schedule. My
Yep.
question is, how does the general fund support an enterprise fund endeavor?
This would be excluded debt. We would have to vote it excluded debt for a portion of this. The betterment portion would have to go, is the only other portion. And
I guess I'm just a little confused. So, I guess let's start at the beginning. Do we have enterprise funds set up in the town for water and sewer? We don't have sewer, we have water, correct?
correct.
So those would be the funds that support this program on a user base, whatever percentage that is, a user base fee. How do we take on debt if in fact it is for a enterprise fund on the general fund side? I guess that's what I'm a little confused on. Unless it's not enterprise fund debt. Is it general fund debt?
It is general fund debt.
And
So
how-
they're asking the town to pay for this sewer and water line on Route 6 but the supporting, once it's up and running, my understanding is once it's up and running, the maintenance and everything would be supported through the enterprise fund.
Okay, that's where I have an issue. I think that I think we should check on this before we go forward. This is all part of water and sewer infrastructure. So, we're trying to put the line down Route 6 and whatever we're gonna do. How do we have the residents who are gonna benefit from that water line pay residents who are not benefiting from that, pay for that endeavor? From my understanding is the water and sewer enterprise is from day one. Once you implement water and sewer, you have to have the water sewer enterprise set up, which we have half of it. Then any borrowing and subsequent borrowing to build that infrastructure comes from sewer rates, water and sewer rates, with an initial borrowing, but that gets paid through the rate. It doesn't get paid through the general fund. I guess I'm a little confused.
So my understanding is that the betterments, there's a fixed number, right, of 20% of the actual costs of the sewer project. So that could be 5 million, it could be 6.5 million. The betterments also.
I'm going to ask about, because is the betterment paid before construction or not until after the pipe is in and connected to the house? I think it's voluntary to connect, but the betterment may or may not be voluntary. How does that work? And that's really what we're talking about. If that were paid right along with it, then there wouldn't be a burden on the general fund. The betterment would pay for the betterment portion. But it sounds like there's a lag between the investment in constructing the water line and actually getting the betterment payments. Or maybe I'm just wrong.
From what I read, it did say that the betterments would be due once the service was available, right? So go ahead.
So as far as the betterments go, the sewer's going to go down Route 6. All the properties fronting along Route 6 will be assessed a betterment. That actual betterment will not be finalized until the project is completed and all the costs associated with that sewer have been calculated, including all the borrowing and interest for that betterment's portion. So that'll all be included in the betterment. So if we borrow 6 million and there's $1.5 million of interest over the 20 years, that is included in the total betterment. People are not required to tie into the sewer, but they will be required to pay the betterment.
But so there will be a lag, I assume, then during the construction phase. The general borrowing takes place to be able to pay the bill of the construction, and the betterment will pick up its portion of the overall cost, but not until construction is completed. So what happens in the meantime in terms of debt service?
I hate to put Sue on the spot, but I'm going to defer to Sue on this one.
Okay. Two things. The betterment is not paying the entire cost of the line. what the infrastructure committee wants to do is have the betterment, which will only pay approximately 20% of the cost of putting the line in. And those are billed, you're billed the betterment simply for having the line go past your property.
Mhm.
You don't, whether you connect or not, you're still billed the betterment. And
So I
that would
think-
be at the end, and they have 20 years in which they can pay the betterment over 20 years. The rest of the cost, the infrastructure committee was looking at the general fund or the general population of Westport to pay for the rest of it.
Well, you say general fund, and really, I think we're talking at this point about the debt exclusion, which will pay for everything until the betterment charge is in place, when that will be contributed to the operation. So in that sense, I don't think it's, well, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think it comes out of the general fund. It comes out of the financing for the debt exclusion, right?
The betterment would be a separate borrowing. The portion that's a betterment would be a separate borrowing so that we can track it separately and so forth. And again, that will be a separate accounting of the funds as they come back in to pay it, so that those funds, we have existing betterments. They're actually technically special assessments for septic now that we use Clean Water Trust loans for. So we borrow those funds, and then as the people are paying those back, that's where the source of funding is to pay back those septic betterment loans that we have now, or special assessments.
So the question that I have as well is the $6 million loan that will eventually collect the betterments that will be used to repay the loan. But there's going to be a 3-year period where construction of the water sewer line is being done before assessments can be made. So there's going to be a 3-year period that the town has to pay the debt service. So the town is going to have to be making payments. There's no funds in the enterprise account because there's no water fees, or there's nothing that there's nothing coming into the enterprise fund yet. So how does the 3-year period for the $6 million betterment loan get paid?
Well,
how does it not affect the general fund?
During that 3-year period, the 29 million, the infrastructure committee is not asking they're just asking that the people who are utilizing it and the people who better get the betterment pay for that. They're asking that the entire town pay for that. So therefore, it's going to be excluded debt. And that is actually what we would borrow first. We would stop, say, for instance, the first borrowing might be 10 million to get the project up and running. And then like a year later, we may borrow another 10 million. The last 6 million would be for the betterments. And at that point, we would be able to start rolling out the billing for the betterments at that time.
So I think what you're saying is all excluded debt, so it doesn't come out of the operating fund, right?
That's
No,
correct. Does not come out of the operating fund.
I thought the 6 million is non-excluded debt.
All of it's has to be voted non-excluded. It would, if any of this is, it's going to be voted non-excluded. The betterment portion is actually outside of debt. Those things, it doesn't come from the general fund. It's not added onto the tax base afterwards. The repayment of that comes from the payments for the benefits. The repayment when the people stop paying in. Theo had indicated.
I guess I'm confused because how can you raise and appropriate excluded debt to use? Are you saying to use that cash to pay for the loan? But it's not, you can't raise and appropriate excluded debt because you haven't taken that debt out because you don't have the expense yet, right?
No, we're not. No, what I'm saying is the 6 million is a separate loan. It's what they call outside of debt service. because it's not included in the tax dollars at all. It's the money to pay that back. The existing Clean Water Trust loans, the debt service is funded either excluded, which is added on to the tax rate afterwards, included debt, which is part of the tax rate or part of the general fund, and the Clean Water Trust are outside of debt, which are paid for from these funds that debts, when we collect it in the collector's office, the money from there goes into a fund, and that's what's used to pay back the Clean Water Trust loans.
Right, but if Sue, if the 6 million, the money you need to collect to pay that debt, you won't have collected yet.
No, but that would be like at the tail end that we would borrow it and we can stop billing it out. Now, what happens is generally they have 30 days. They'll get billed their betterment. A notice will go out saying, this is your betterment amount, $10,000, for example. People can pay it then and pay it in full, the $10,000, whatever the amount comes out to for their betterment, and pay it up front. You'll get, Theo indicated in Mattapoisett, they had closer to about 50% of the people did that. And then the other 50% will pay over time. And the ones that are paying over time, we can also charge interest to. They can have up to 20 years to pay off that debt. And it's billed through the tax bills.
Right. But then I thought you cannot bill the betterment until the project is complete. So that's
the betterment is there.
Right. That's 3 years down the road.
But that's when, as the project's getting closer to completion, we could borrow that money to fund the final completion and bill it at that same time. So it's going to be about a year. We wouldn't need to make, because it would probably be a ban at first. So we'll borrow the money and then be able to bill within that year. And if you have 50% of the people pay in, we can pay down with the money that's paid in. They only have 30 days. So if we bill it out sometime within that year, they have 30 days in which to decide if they want to pay it off. And we'll have some funds that will come in to make that payment. And the rest we will reborrow.
Can I
billing?
Yeah, go ahead.
This is hard for us to understand. Can you imagine the residents trying to wrap their hands around this? I mean, let's face it. I think everybody in this committee wants clean water. There's no doubt about that. We want to have the infrastructure in place that we can have and draw business. But we live in between two communities that have the Walmarts, the McDonald's, the Burger Kings, and so on and so forth. And maybe there's industry out there that wants to move to town and have that. But I think that we should at least set up an enterprise fund first, okay? And then move forward with it. I think this is like a pig in a poke, because we're banking on residents that are going to A, connect, B, want to be on the service, but yet have all this outstanding debt. And here's the other thing. Again, I go back to my original statement. We're looking at putting an infrastructure in and having it become general fund obligation. And I don't think that that's fair and equitable to people that are not benefiting from this system, and B, that don't even really understand it. So, I'll tell you right now, I'm going to vote no on this when it comes up, because I think that there needs to be more research. Look, we sit here and we argue about cutting the schools $800,000, and then nickel and diming the IT department, but yet we're ready to spend $35 million on a sewer line or a water line from Fall River. I mean, I don't know. The more and more I hear about it, the more and more I questions I have. And if we have questions, can you imagine what the general public's going to think?
Yep.
Go ahead, Al.
Oh, I have so much to say. I don't think we have enough time. The way that this project, in my opinion, has been proposed over a number of years is so wrong in so many levels that I can't, my head is exploding. The Infrastructure Committee has been in existence for 20 years. They brought to us and the community a proposal, big fancy proposal, PowerPoint, engineers and all on January 24th, starting to propose a 3-tier system, or structure of a trunk that went down Route 6. Within an hour and a half, after 20 years of them debating it, have all of a sudden flipped. It's almost like Forrest Gump, I mean, it just like, oh, and then something happened. And the next thing you know, initially a number was thrown out at $31 million. Oh no, let's throw it to $35 million. And that's what's on the ballot right now. They don't have a number. They don't have a number. After 20 years, there is no number. They can't tell the residents in the area what is, they're throwing around $10,000, what is it, an ETU? Is that what they call it? Or I don't want to call it a UTI, but an ETU. EDU. Thank you, Cindy. But they don't really know the number. And in fact, there's been word floating around that they don't know the number, and it may be that the 20/80 split that they're talking about right now may be a 10/90 split if the number gets too high. They don't know what the numbers are. But what we're being fed is absolutely a project with no solid figures whatsoever, and estimates, guesstimates. Oh, gee, I think it'll be this, that, and the other. And how can we as a finance committee vote to support this kind of fiscal, and I'll call it, this is my words, not your words, irresponsibility. It's irresponsible after all these years not to. And then and unfortunately I have too much time on my hands, so I have watched the video of the Infrastructure Committee 2 or 3 times, and at minute 59, the engineer, Roger, I think his name is, it could be, yeah, Roger, blurted out, kind of, probably he didn't want to do it, that money may be diverted from this to do the loop around the Macomber School. Now, that's what was said. Now, whether he meant it, whether that, but then the committee, and this is what really drives me crazy. The committee talks about the trunk line down Route 6, but the warrant issue never says anything about a trunk line down Route 6. It is completely irrelevant to it just not. So it allows a blank card, blank check to go anywhere. Maybe that's the intention. And one of the members said the other day in the meeting, well, we're not going to exceed this amount of money. But if you look at the Warren article, it doesn't say to exceed the article. And in fact, after the $35 million, which was kind of like throwing Velcro on the ceiling, it said, and other ancillary and incidental expenses as necessary. So I'm just going to be quiet right now, but this is so wrong in so many ways. It is the warrant issue should not be voted on, and I will not support it as written. I'm all for clean water. I'm all for the concept of the project, but the way in which it is written and it is to be instituted, I just cannot support it. So I'll leave it at that.
I didn't think we were talking about the water and sewer project.
I know, but we kind of morphed into that, Cindy. I'm sorry.
Can we go back to Article 4, please?
Good point.
Yes. Yeah, no, we can certainly
I would
talk
just
about
like to
Article
make a
14.
couple
Go ahead.
of
Go ahead,
follow-up
Jim.
comments on that?
We're on 14, so let's keep talking. So go ahead. That's okay.
So a couple of things, right? And I'm not speaking for the infrastructure committee, and this is a project that we're really focusing on the first phase for a while, and that changed relatively quickly. So we readjusted, right? We had our engineer, when they talk about estimates changing, we had so let's say a final estimate, because it's all it is, an estimate for the first phase. When we went to the full phase, we went back to the engineer and came up with a new estimate, right? And that's $34,094,112. Includes a 10% contingency for construction, a 12% contingency, not contingency, but 12% for construction oversight and engineering, and includes costs for police details, which comes out to about $569,000 estimated. So we have a very good estimate now. And in a lot of these estimates, you do not, as the project progresses, right, the estimates get better, and that goes with any project. They've gone out for bid. So by town meeting vote, you will have an actual bid. You will actually have a in-hand, not estimate, but contract bid of what the project is going to cost. As far as the EDUs go, the committee was trying to keep the betterments at around $10,000 or under per single family house. We cannot do that specifically as the way the betterments are set up by law. So you do it as a percentage of the total cost. So the committee and the select board in the warrant article have put in 20% of the total cost of the sewer for the Route 6 trunk line will be paid by betterments. And we estimate, based on our current estimates, that to be somewhere around $8,000. But it could go up to $9,000 depending on where the bids come in, because it's actual construction costs. But this is what communities do, right? This is what you guys are getting extremely deep into the weeds, and I think it's great. But most people don't get into these details, and it's a good way to get this information out there, and it's a good way to keep us on our toes. But this is what we do for these projects, right? As the estimates come in, we fine tune them. We go out to bid, we construct the project, and then based on the actual construction costs, we assess the betterments. The town is authorizing or requesting authorization to borrow $35 million. All construction costs will not come out of, or borrowing costs or interest costs will not come out of the operating funds. Those are going to be funded through borrowing, period. And how that exactly works I'm still trying to understand. But talking to other communities, it works, and this is what they do. So it does not come out of the operating budget. The trunk line is the trunk line. When we sent the warrant articles to town council to be reviewed, town council suggested that we include area after Route 6, partly because we have 4 pump stations being constructed that aren't in Route 6. They're on abutting properties. We're also going to extend stubs into the abutting streets. So the question is that part of Route 6, or does that, a piece of that go into Washington Street or, Berryman Street? So he felt more comfortable saying area. At the selectmen's meeting, it seemed to expand a little bit more to greater Route 6 area. That is how the ballot question is worded. It says greater Route 6 area. And I don't want to say it gives flexibility, but it opens it up a little bit more than Route 6, but the limited borrowing is $35 million. The warrant article says Route 6 area. In the form of a motion, they can restrict that further just to make it clear that it's only Route 6. As far as the loop, whether he said it properly or not, if the grant funding comes in for the waterline loop, there's about 0.6 of a mile of waterline extension in Route 6 that is included as part of that grant. So that 0.6, whatever it comes out to $1 million, $1.5 million, would be reduced from the overall cost of the Route 6 project, because we would pay for that out of the grant. So when he said diverted, I think he maybe misspoke or misrepresented, but we're not diverting funds. We would reduce funds if we could have another funding source, such as a grant. I think that's it.
Karen, you're muted.
Thank you. So Jim, then that would mean that the loop is then included in the 35 million.
So a portion of the loop is included in the 45 million.
35 million, not 45.
35 million. Yes, okay.
Yeah.
Don't do
here we
that.
go.
And if I can share my screen here real quick.
So that's, that's the first time I'm actually hearing that, right? Because we've been asking and asking, what is the 35 million? And we've been told it's the trunk line only. And the map that's been presented to us was the trunk line only.
And that's correct. The 35 million is the trunk line only as far as I'm concerned. It's the trunk line only.
But it's also the loop.
No, as a separate project.
But if it's in the 35 million, that's part of it.
So we applied for a grant separate from the 35 million, just for water line improvements. And this blue line here, the water line ends right here next to the Housing Authority property. With this grant funds, we would extend the water line down Route 6 to approximately Washington Street. There's a property here that has a public water supply with PFAS contamination. There's another public water supply over here that has some high levels. I don't think it's PFAS, but something else. The Macomber School has high levels of manganese. So we would extend it, this blue line, down Route 6, and we would construct this loop down Gifford Road to the Macomber School, and then down Osborne Street back to Route 6.
So, Madam Chair, I'm going to be a jerk here and just interject your question. So, what if you don't, Jim? What if you don't get the funding? Is that still part of the project?
If we don't get funding, if this grant does not come through, this section of water line is included in the $35 million for Route 6.
So that's the bogey right there. Is that regardless of whether we get the funding or not, it is included in the $35 million, which detracts 4 or 5 or 6 million, whatever the number is, from the $35 million project.
So if we get the grant and we construct this, and this may very well get constructed before the rest of it does, there would be a savings on the Route 6 project of $1-2 million.
But what if it doesn't? I think, one of the things about the finance committee or a business person is that you need to look at the worst case scenario and hope for the best. But what I hear from the infrastructure committee and what you just said, and you know how much I respect you, so I'm not trying to beat you up, is that okay. Well, we get grants and we can apply for this and we can apply for that. But what if we don't get any? Westport has not been historically a community that gets a hell of a lot of grants or low interest loans, especially related to this. So if the townspeople vote for, this at the ballot or at the warrant, and this stuff doesn't come through, a warrant is a contract. A warrant is an obligation. We are still on the hook for it.
So this I'm not explaining this very well, right? So the $35 million includes all the water and all the sewer in Route 6.
Including the loop?
Not the loop, just Route 6.
Right. So if we do the loop, then at the other end, at the Dartmouth line, if we only spend the 35 mil, that money is going to have to be pushed back, and we're not going to be able to complete the loop to Dartmouth unless we go back to the townspeople for another debt exclusion. Am I missing
That's correct. No, I think you got it. If we do not get the grant, the loop does not get constructed, this section of Route 6 would get constructed under the 35 million. If we do not get the grant, this does not get constructed.
Okay.
This is kind of a separate project as far as I'm concerned.
Well, yeah, and it kind of just popped up recently, as I said earlier, and I don't want to belabor the point, that I've been looking at all the different things, and that just popped up in mid to late January, that all of a sudden, this loop comes available, and we went from the 3 separate projects to 35 million, but it was 31 million, and then it's this, and then it's that, and it's back and forth. I mean, it's like whack-a-mole. It's financial whack-a-mole.
It may
Yeah,
seem like that, but it is fairly structured and organized.
Jim, maybe you can just clarify. I'm still confused, to be quite honest. So regardless of the funding source, what is the cost of the loop, the water loop?
So this water loop plus this section of Route 6 is estimated at around $4 million. I think it was $3.8 million.
Okay, we'll say 4 million.
Yeah.
And what's the grant that you're hoping to get?
4 million.
You're hoping to get for 4 million.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay.
And that would be a good thing, right? If we get $4 million for.
Yeah, I'm
that's
not,
a positive thing.
my questions are not judgment. Should we do the loop? Does it make sense to do the loop? Is there value to it? It's trying to understand what's part of the 35 million, what's being disclosed. It's very, very confusing. It has to be confusing for the homeowners who are listening to whatever meetings they're listening to and have to make a decision to go out to the ballot in 2 weeks to determine what to do. And you yourself are saying that the bids are going to be in for town meeting, but the bids won't be in for the ballot. So people are going to the ballot and don't really have a clear picture. Is it the loop? Is it not the loop? It's just very confusing. And I'm trying to sort it out because I want to support this. I want to support it, but I'm having a really difficult time, quite honestly, saying that this is ready.
These numbers are staggering, to say the least. I mean, you're right. And listen, this is nothing, Jim. You do a great job here, and you're pretty much the messenger here. Right? We understand that, and the presentations that you've given us throughout the fiscal year is phenomenal. We're not saying that, but I think as a resident looking in, and we're all residents, how we see these numbers of 5 million, 6 million, 35 million. I mean, right there, just without even understanding it, it's probably a no vote, because in their minds, they're going to say, oh my God, I gotta spend this kind of money on a betterment. I don't even know what a betterment is. So I think we're jumping ahead. We're trying to understand the financing of this. I think we've jumped a little bit too fast in this whole project. I get that we need to probably had it done 10 years ago, but what's the risk of waiting a little bit longer? I mean, are we under some kind of order that we need to get this done right now? Do we have to, I mean, is there some kind of mandate or?
The information would be just as confusing 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 12 months from now. When have we ever passed a debt exclusion like this on the first ballot? Of course, it's probably going to get voted down. People don't understand it. It's the first step in the process. I would hate to say, well, no, people don't understand it. Let them at least know that, be aware that this is an issue. Maybe we'll give people some incentive to try to understand it more and have more of these meetings. Personally, I don't think it will succeed at the ballot. I wish that it would, but I don't think that it will. Fine. We'll try again and we'll try again. But to say, let's put it off, you're going to have just as confusing information 6 months from now, 9 months from now, 12 months from now. The numbers will not be concrete then, because we don't know. How can we plan for what the amount will be? They said up to 35 million. Well, if you back out the 4 million, now you've got a little bit of a cushion. Maybe you don't have a cushion. Maybe prices will go up. I don't know. I mentioned this to Karen the other day. Other than TV sets, what item has ever gone down in price in 3 years? 3 years from now, this is going to cost $50 million. So
Jim, is there a mandate that we have to meet here, or that's my question?
There is no mandate.
Okay, thanks.
Let me say that there is no mandate, but the public water supplies along Route 6 are being forced to either put in $150,000 PFAS filtration system or tie into public water. Not all of them. There's only a couple that are exceeding the EPA levels. You got, this is what's happening, right? And it's, I think we can all agree that wells are not going to improve as new chemicals and new materials introduced into this society. It's eventually going to get into the water table, into our water supplies, and unless it's treated, you're going to have issues. But You know, there is no specific mandate. If this is done this year, it's still going to take 2 or 3 years to construct, right? So it's not like they're going to have sewer and water, you know, later this summer.
I just want to make one comment, and then Hugh, you're next. So as far as I understand, the new school that was built was the largest project that the town's ever had, right? At that amount, right? Is this the second largest project that the town has ever faced? I think it is.
I would think so, yes. Yeah.
So this is not insubstantial to have something come up and kind of roll it through without a lot of understanding from the town to understand the impact of this. But
absolutely,
it's the second largest project ever.
Some of these decisions are going to be made, you know, by the first or second week of April after the election. You know, voting on the warrant articles will probably change after the April election, depending on what happens, right?
Right.
Yeah, and I don't buy into the notion, you know, that we just keep trying and keep trying and keep trying. Let's get it right the first time. Let's go to the ballot with good information. Let's get the ducks in a row so that we don't have to keep on going back to the ballot for approval or back to town meeting for approval. Let's get it right the first time.
So I just got the information is good, and I don't know how I can get that out there, but the information we have is good. Whether or not the information is getting out there properly to everybody's satisfaction, I think is, you know, a good question. But the information we have is good. It's done by the professional engineers that we've hired. We've had bond counsel review things. We've had town council review things. This is the way it's done. Is it being done very quickly? I think so. But the information is good.
Great. Thanks, Jim. There's a number of questions that are, go ahead, Hugh.
I was just going to say, I don't think we're going to resolve that tonight. Is there anything else we should be dealing with?
Thank you for that comment, Hugh. I think we have initially, I think the request was to invite the infrastructure committee back in to kind of talk through some of these things, and that may still be warranted, but I'm going to just entertain the rest of the questions that are here. Go ahead, Sue.
Jim, the water loop that you're talking about, is there a separate article on the warrant for that?
It does not require a town article. It'd be funded completely with grant funds.
Okay. All right. But if we do get those grant funds, that loop will go in because that's just water. It is not sewer, correct?
That's correct. No betterments, no operating expenses.
Correct. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Al, and then Michelle.
Al, you're on mute.
Al, you're still on mute. Still on mute. There you go.
Not anymore. and boy, most people would like me to be on mute. Excuse me. So I know that we've shifted from Article 4 to Article 15, and that's dominated. So I know it's like ping pong, and I'll make it very brief. The way the article on the town warrant is written, it doesn't. Everybody is talking about the trunk line, but the article does not specify the trunk line. It says greater, Route 6 area. And that bothers me because that leaves one hell of a lot of flexibility. And maybe that is the intention of everybody, and I'm not diminishing that. So why not just put it on there? Why not just say this is a trunk line from point A to point B, period, end of paragraph? Why does it have to be? And you know what? Just because a lawyer says it doesn't mean it's accurate. I mean, I don't want to get into the lawyer thing, but
well, the Attorney General has something to say about that, though.
Well, you know what? That's a lawyer too. The fact is that what we have been talking about and what the committee has been selling to the people of the town, who are spending potentially $35 million is a trunk line down Route 6. But that's not what it says. That's not what the article says. That is not what a governing body needs to do ultimately for this. So I think we need to, really just take a half a step back and forget the lawyers and forget the AG and all the other stuff, and let's start talking about common sense, because that is ultimately the taxpayers of the entire town, not just the people in the service area, but the entire town are going to have to pay for 20, maybe 30 years. We don't know. So that's.
Thanks, Al. Go ahead, Michelle. Thank you for your patience.
No problem. And again, I don't want to take more time than everybody has taken. I don't want to beat a dead horse. But so I listened to the meeting last week because I wasn't on it, and I went to the neighborhood association meeting on Saturday. So I heard a little bit more about this. And I think and I want to say thank you, because I thought it was me not understanding everything. So I was happy to hear that. As a newbie, I thought it was me, but I was happy to hear that some of the rest of you didn't understand it either. So if I'm feeling that way, that's how the people of Westport are going to feel that we're expected to vote on it. And what I was thinking about is the people that have been working on this project, and I commend them. I can only imagine the amount of time that it's taken to get to this point, but they've been working on it for a long time, and they understand it. And it has, I feel, again, my opinion, as Al says, this is me speaking, I feel like all of a sudden we're getting it and we have to vote on this. And I know that there's been some meetings. There was a meeting at the Macomb School, again, the neighborhood association. They were on last week's finance committee, but I don't think it's enough time to digest this. And again, I think it is very misleading, because what I thought when I read this first, from when I saw the meeting to what I was at on Saturday to today, I've heard so many different things. I don't know which one it means. And I think, and I agree with what Gary said, that the more times you put on it, I think it creates a mistrust with town government and the people. I think they just feel like, oh, they're going to throw it out there and see what you get, and let's see if it sticks. And I don't know if anybody is on social media, but if you're on the Westport Facebook page, there are a lot of people that are going to vote against this, especially people along Route 6. I must have saw 30 posts, and I'm not sure that I saw one in favor it. And I know that's only a sampling, but I think if recent history serves a purpose with the town override, it's quick. People are not informed properly. And I think, again, like everybody says, we all want good water. That's not the issue at all, but we need to do it in a way where people believe in it. They know what the costs are, because there's a lot of debt exclusion right now on everybody's taxes. And I think we need to not do it as many times as it takes. I think we need to do it right the first time. But again, I think the people that have taken a lot of time to work through this, I give them a lot of credit, and I thank them for this, but I think everybody else needs a little bit more time to understand what it is that we're being asked to vote on. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was so well said. So thank you. And
Karen, if I could make one quick suggestion.
Yeah, sure. Please do.
Maybe while for you or maybe a couple members of the finance committee to meet independently and with us or members of the infrastructure oversight committee to go over the details, so that we're not hashing everything out here and then bring the unknowns or the questions back to the full committee. I think we may be able to accomplish a little bit more if we can actually dive into a lot of the minutiae with this project. There's papers and plans and specs and estimates that we could show you or show somebody to show that this stuff has been done, but it's difficult. And I don't have the answer, right? I don't have the answer for the committee. I don't know how we get it out to the public better than we have, or in different ways, or how we extend the time. Sometimes you have to work with what we have to work with. And I think that's where we are right now. And, we'll see what the voters do in April, and then see what happens at town meeting. But I think the specific questions, some of the questions you had, there's answers to those questions, but it's extremely difficult to articulate them in this type of format.
Mm-hmm. No, I appreciate that, Jim. Let me think about that. I think part of having the conversation here is that whoever might be listening from the general public should be hearing the answers too and the questions and sorting through it. That helps eliminate some of the myths and things that are happening. But in terms of the way that the Article 14 is written, and I can appreciate from a legal standpoint, the more generic you make it, the better it is and it's safer. But from everybody else who's thinking, oh, they're going into neighborhoods, oh, they're doing this, oh, they're doing that, that article perpetuates that because it's not clear. If the article was clear, then people could read that and you've negated all of these myths that are going on. And, I'll say, I sent it to you. There are maps posted all over Route 6 that are, where did those come from? Why are they there? How did they get there? Because they're inaccurate. They're not this project. Those are posted in businesses all around Route 6.
So
where did that come from?
That's a good point. And I think anybody out there that's listening, they should go to the town website to get their information and not to the local convenience store or restaurant. That's where the information is. That's where the maps are. That's where the frequently asked questions are. That's where the plans are. And if they have any questions, to contact us, and we'll try to answer them the best we can. And as we can tell from this meeting, these questions are not always easy to answer, and they don't always make sense. So, we'll do what we can.
Yeah. One of the suggestions that I had spoken to a committee member, and then maybe Christopher, who's a liaison to the committee. My suggestion is to try to create, I know you've got the frequently asked questions and you've got presentations, and if somebody wants to watch a 2-hour meeting, they can get information. But I think it's important if you could have a 1-page quick facts, quick information, a one or 2 pages at the most, with just, here's the summary of the project, and give a summary of what people that are on Route 6, give an estimate of what their costs are going to be, detail and itemize it out between the betterment, the interest that they're going to get on the betterment if they choose to not pay it, their connection fees for water, connection fees for sewer, an estimated construction cost to connect into the line, and then give an estimate of what a 3-bedroom home is going to have for monthly water and sewer usage bills, right? So put that all out for people, because it's not out there. You have to watch so many meetings and maybe you can pick one thing out. Like, have a 1-page fact.
Nope, it's a great point. We'll work on that.
Yeah, 1 page. It's, an executive, and even that fact sheet can be, here's what it's not, right? So here's what it is, but deploy, talk about the myths out there. It is not this, it is not that. Just 1 page to sum all of this up, I think is a crucial element to get out to people. But
all right, that was easy. What's next?
Okay.
Stop throwing me softballs.
All right. Well, Jim, I think we want to let you go.
All right. I'm going to leave on that note before something else comes up. You guys have a good night.
Yeah.
We greatly
don't let the door hit you in the rear end on the way out, right?
Jim, just as Al said and Gary said, we appreciate everything you do, and you're always here for us to help, and you always put us in the right direction. So I appreciate you spending the time tonight to
thank you guys. You keep us on our toes. I appreciate that. You guys have a good night. Take care.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks. All right.
Go home and see your family.
Holy banoolies. Okay, so it is 8:35, and we do have a lot of warrant articles that we need to start to go through and vote on. We don't need to do it tonight, but we are starting to. I think we can have a dedicated meeting if we prefer to not do any more this evening. We can do that.
I would suggest there's some we technically have to approve, but it'll take about 5 minutes. That's because they already have the funds when they're transferring around. And maybe we do a quick breeze through the things that don't require any time.
Yeah. The one item that we haven't really talked through is the budget, right? So we had, where we last left it was, there was a town engineer that was in there. We wanted to get some clarification on that. But the biggest item was the school number in terms of where do we sit with that. And then the third item was, I had recommended to add some money to the animal control budget. I had suggested 20,000. I did reach out to the Board of Health, who then took it to their board, and I put it in our folder tonight. So they are requesting 25,000. That would really be what they would need. So those are the three things on the budget that we really still need to talk through. We don't need to do it tonight, but we really need to do it in our next meeting. So it's up to the committee. Do you want to call it tonight?
Well, are you still inviting the infrastructure committee to the next meeting? If you are, that's going to take up the whole meeting again.
Yeah, I mean, does everyone, what does everyone think? I mean, do we want to talk to the infrastructure committee more because I have more questions. And again, I shot Jim a long email of a number of questions, which I will forward to you now, so you can see some of the questions that myself and other members who I had spoken with over the last week in a non-quorum way had some comments, and I kind of try to put a lot of them together.
I guess my question would be, is there anything that the committee could say? I guess when answering that individually per member, is there anything that any one of those committee members could say that would change your mind on the vote? So, if you think that there are things that they could add that might change your mind, then fine. But if we're just going to keep going through what we went through last week and what we went through tonight and what we're going to go through again next week, and it's the same information, then I don't really see the point. If you think that there's information that will change your mind, then fine. I'm all for having them back in again, but that's just my opinion.
I think Cindy's right. We've thrashed it at great length for a couple of meetings. So
I'm sorry, say that again, Hugh. I missed what you said.
I think we have thrashed it around for a couple of meetings. And I think even though we're confused in some things, I don't know they make a great deal of difference in terms of how you approach it.
Thank you. Go ahead, Christopher, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you. So what I wanted to mention here is I think that Cindy has a point as far as how much time has been discussed, or we've taken to discuss it, but also I think Jim mentioned the possibility of maybe even getting a questionnaire together to give to the infrastructure committee in written form to get presented with answers, and I think that actually might be a more certainly an efficient use of time, but I also think it would be frankly easier to get that together from the infrastructure committee's perspective than it would be to have another whole meeting dedicated to it. So if that's something that can be done, even if it just starts with the questions that you had forwarded to Jim, and to build on those, but that's my suggestion.
Thanks. Yeah, I wasn't anticipating us having a conversation tonight, but but we did speak a lot of things. So go ahead, Michelle.
I was just going to suggest, and it kind of follows along what Christopher said, and you said you already sent a list of questions. Maybe, I mean, for me, there might be questions that could be answered that could change my mind. I don't know, but I do have questions based on everything that I've heard so far. So why not look at your list of questions that you put together. Maybe we all have our own list of questions. Try to combine that. Try to keep the meeting very limited, because I agree we've spent a lot of time and have, a lot of people have spent a lot of time on it, and maybe just try after that, we would have to take a vote or whatever. But I think next week would be like, the drop dead meeting with specific questions, a specific goal for that meeting, to be able to move on from it.
Sure. And I'll forward the list of questions. And then if you all have more questions, we can add to the list and we can send it off to them in advance. So we can do that. So I'd love to hear from Duncan and Zach on your thoughts on this, because I haven't heard from either of you.
Go ahead, Duncan.
Yeah, I guess
you know, I guess my biggest question is what happens if the finance committee doesn't approve this warrant article for the debt exclusion?
Well, the finance committee makes a recommendation to town meeting, so
Right.
that's all we do. So
I
the
understand,
town
but
meeting's gonna vote.
that has implications though. That has significant implications. I would think.
It may or may not. We've, you know, the finance committee's made recommendations before and the town meeting does what it chooses to do. So of course it potentially has implications, but yes.
And again, are people going to know what our position is as a committee before the election?
No.
Well, we will, before the election. Well, we don't make recommendations on the ballot, so we're making recommendations.
No, but I mean,
but
it may come out that we've decided to not support it or not recommend it. I mean,
Right.
is that an issue? I don't know.
I think, you know, we need to do what we need to do to prepare to get our answers to make our recommendations for the town meeting. If it happens to be next week, which makes sense for us because we really need to start to finalize these, then so be it. So we can't wait to make a recommendation after the ballot just to you know, we've got to vote.
That's fine. I just
Yeah.
I don't know the
Yeah.
process. Oh, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, this is, I think, the first time that we're voting on something for town meeting that's also at the ballot before the town meeting. So this is very unusual for all of it.
And you know, to your point, Karen, this is you know, the second largest project that the town has ever undertaken, and you know, that shouldn't be lost on people.
Right. Zach, are you here? Do you have
Yes.
any, yes, go ahead, Zach, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm here. I think Jim brought up a good point with information, and maybe there's more out there that we haven't been digging into ourselves. I think maybe we could come up with a list of questions, dig into it on our own time, trying to answer as many questions as we can. And kind of in the same vein of what Hugh is saying, maybe we could work on chipping away at the things that will go a little bit quicker, not lose, you know, productivity in the next meeting, and then come circle back around to that when we've done a little bit more due diligence.
Sure thing. Go ahead, Hugh, you've got your hand up.
I just want to make a comment as far as Duncan's concerned. The finance committee advises the town meeting. The finance committee is not a political instrument that advocates promoting things, etc. So I don't think it would be appropriate for us, whatever our conclusions were before the election, to go around taking a position, shall we say. I think that's ventures into the electioneering. We went through this at great length in connection with the override of what we can and cannot do. This is different, but it has similarities.
And I totally get that, Hugh. I was just, again, thinking about, given the magnitude of this project and, you know, and our role in, you know, making that recommendation. That was my question.
Yeah, and unfortunately the ballot meeting is April 9th, right?
Yes.
Right.
That is our absolute drop dead, that we have to have all our recommendations done so that we can go to town meeting. So I would not suggest that we wait till the 9th to have that discussion as a group, because if we're having a discussion and we then say, oh, well, we needed one more piece of information for clarity, we have no time. So I would not suggest.
I believe April 9th is the election. I'm not sure it has anything to do with the close of the warrant, etc.
But we have to get it to the select board for posting and printing by then. We've promised that we would have it to them. Yeah.
Right.
That's what I say, but it is not, 9th happens for the election. I wasn't sure the two were connected.
No, it just happens to be the same thing. So it needs to be out, right. The 9th was our drop dead, and even Jim was thinking that was a little on the late side for us. So, you know, we should try for April 2nd. And so that's only two more weeks. So, so unfortunately, I think that's just the timing of it.
Madam Chair, I hate
Go
to
ahead.
interject. I really do think, to Mr. Morton's point, there may be some issues with coming out with a recommendation on this as it relates to potential electioneering. So we probably want to get some clarity on that just to make sure, because I think that may actually be an issue. If certainly not discussing it, but a formal vote might run afoul.
But our vote will be of public record. I mean, if we vote on it, whether we vote on it tonight, next week, or whatever week, if the press picks it up or any individual watches this meeting, it's a matter of public record that could be disseminated in any way. So, I mean, no different than we took a recommendation regarding the override as a committee. As long as we're not out there campaigning one way or the other, our committee has a responsibility to come up with a recommendation about the article that's before us. So I can't see how that it would, that's our charge is to make a recommendation. So I can't see how that would be electioneering in any stretch of imagination, provided we're not going out there campaigning for it, for or against. We merely take our vote as a member of the finance committee, and it's public record whenever that vote is taken.
Yeah, Cindy, that was basically my point. I don't disagree with you.
Yeah, right. I think that's fine.
Duncan, did you still have your hand up, or was that from before? You're muted too. Oh, no hand up. Okay. So it's 8:47. Do we want to call it tonight? All right. So let's just do one administrative thing if we could approve the minutes since we've pushed that off for 3 weeks.
So moved.
So the minutes of February 20th, 2024. We could do all 3 minutes together if everyone is comfortable with that.
Yep, bundle it as a package.
All right, we will do a bundle. We are going to say the minutes of February 20th, 2024, March 5th, 2024, and March 12th, 2024. I'd like a motion to
So moved.
approve. Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you. I will do a roll call. Any discussion on any of those minutes? All right, I will do a roll call. Christopher.
Aye.
Thank you. Hugh Morton.
Hugh Morton, aye.
Al.
Al Lees, aye.
Thank you. Duncan.
Duncan Law, aye.
Thank you. Zach.
Aye.
Michelle.
Michelle Orlando, aye.
Gary.
Yes.
Thank you. Cindy.
Cindy Brown, aye.
And Karen, aye. And so to wrap that, a motion to adjourn, if someone would be so.
Ooh, motion to adjourn.
Time for a cocktail before bed.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you so much. We'll do a roll call quick, and then good night, everyone. Thank you. Christopher.
Christopher Thrasher, aye.
Thank you. Hugh.
Hugh Morton, aye.
Al.
Al Lees, aye.
Duncan.
Duncan Law, aye.
Thank you. Zach.
Zach, aye.
Michelle.
Michelle Orlando, aye.
Thank you. Gary.
Yes.
Thank you. Cindy.
Cindy Brown, aye.
And Karen Rouse, aye. Thank you all. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.